Good morning, everyone. A little coffee ASMR leading off the show. Welcome to another great episode of Maker That Money, live here on the YouTube's 9 a.m. Pacific, just about every Friday. We are the podcast that talks about turning your hobby into your jobby. I am your host, Pooch of Repcord, and with me, as always, my partner in crime, Mr. Andrew Mayhall of 3D Gloop, king of the Empire of Sticky. Good morning, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for asking. Very courteous.
It's Friday
And
again.
it is Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. And we are in the presence of greatness this morning. We have a Mr. Sean Charlesworth of Charlesworth Dynamics with us. Sean, thank you so much for joining us. It is an honor to have you, my friend. You are truly a jack of all trades, a maker to the core. And I'm going to give you the opportunity, instead of me trying to lead in and all this stuff, because the list is just long and distinguished of all the things you've worked on and done. So what is your elevator pitch when people say, who are you? What do you do? What do you tell them?
I'm a fabricator and 3D designer, 3D printer. I have a film background, went to film school, figured out I hated production very quickly. Went behind the scenes and I worked at NYU for about 12 years as the repair tech for all their equipment. And while there, I went to grad school for 3D animation and took a summer one-off course. This is like 2012.
Okay.
No. This is earlier, because this is like 2010.
Yeah.
And I took a one-off 3D printing course during the summer, and I was like, this is magic. And I somehow convinced them to let me do a 3D printing thesis, which is typically when you're in like delivering animation and movie title kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I've been doing 3D printing ever since. So that was like the early days, days of 3D Printer Village at the Maker Fair and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
so you're published.
And then I'll show you what I built. It was this guy, this octopus.
Yeah.
So that's very early. That's an object print, object multi-material print from the early days. And I entered that into Adam Savage's Invent Turn competition that they had on tested.com.
Right.
Early days of Adam's involvement on Tested. I won that. My wife and I moved to San Francisco, not because of Tested, just because it seems like I made some connections there.
Okay.
I started working with Tested, and then that led to working with Tippett Studio, which Tippett Studio does Phil Tippett was the animator and creator for a lot of original Star Wars stuff. He animated the AT-ATs, created Tauntaun, Rancor, stuff like that. They're here in the Bay Area, and I've ended up building stop motion puppets for Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, which never would have dreamed of in a bazillion years that would happen.
That's awesome.
During that time, I've been running an Etsy shop as well, because
just
one
add
of
a
our
little more.
Projects, we did a ghost trap.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we did a ghost trap on Tested, and I released the files in like a how to like build it yourself thing.
Yeah.
3D print it. So I made it you could all 3D print it. And I started getting a lot of people asking, like, well, there's a hardware list, but like, where do you get all this stuff?
Right.
And I was answering email after email after email. Mm-hmm. And I quickly was like, you can't go to Home Depot and pick all this stuff up.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, maybe I could I know where to get this stuff. And so maybe I could offer them. So I started selling hardware kits for the free files, and then it just kind of ballooned from there. So
awesome.
Since 2016, I've been doing the Etsy shop.
Amazing. Yeah. And we're going to get more into that in a moment, but that was an excellent intro, man. And it's more like we should ask you, what don't you do, given all the things that you've experienced just in this period of time.
Well, and I'd also like to say, and this is just encouragement to people out there.
Yeah.
I have only been actively building and doing this stuff for the last 10, 12 years.
Okay.
I always liked projects and piddling, messing around stuff. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really I'd build Lego kits and like some model kits and stuff like that, and then I just started. I know what it was. It was at NYU, and it was that end of the year budget thing where it's like you got to blow like this amount of dollars,
use it or
before you
lose it
in 2 days.
Yeah, right.
And so I'm like going through McMaster Car, like, well, what can I get? What can I get? And I
Right.
bought a milling machine, like
Nice.
just like a super, like a glorified drill press kind of milling machine.
Right.
Never used one.
Right.
And then I quickly realized that all the expenses in buying all the accessories.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I felt guilty, and I'm like, I gotta learn how to use this thing, or like it's just gonna sit there. So I built a stormtrooper blaster out of like light poles and C stands and camera junk.
Yeah.
And that's really the thing that got me started on actually building things. And so like I personally feel like I've been playing catch up for the last 10 years because I haven't been I came kind of later than I wanted to like seriously build stuff. So that's just like encouragement to anybody out there. It's like don't think it's ever too late, you know?
It's never too late.
Yeah, because it's not, and it's been a crazy ride since then. So
man, do I feel that. So everybody in the chat, raise your hand if you've ever bought a piece of equipment, just like Sean had mentioned as a maker here, and then said, okay, I guess I better figure out how to either monetize this thing or get good use out. I mean, that is such the like, I've done that.
The guilt for buying it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I feel that so much. Andrew, you've done that, haven't you? Or like,
oh, absolutely.
you kind of buy the tool first and then you find the project for it and that's so like, that's so maker, but it's like, well, you know what? It's a good thing to have, right? A good investment to make, and look at where it got you, man. It set you on a path, you know? That's incredible.
I wish I could go back to myself right after college when I was living at home and being horribly sad about my situation. Like, yeah, because I originally started in computer engineering and I changed the film. And I remember right after college, I'm living at home and I looked up jobs at ILM and it's like computer science, computer engineering. I'm like, oh, what have I done? So like it kind of came. It took me a while, but I kind of got to where I was going. I just roundabout way.
Circuitous path. Hey, if it makes you feel any better, I had like 3 different majors. I think it's ridiculous that schools make you like declare a major when you're going in. It's like I'm 18. It's like nobody knows really what they're gonna do.
You don't know what.
But you got to start somewhere, I guess, right? So
yeah,
and
that's tough. And like I'm very hands-on. Like I don't learn well from reading a book.
Right.
I need to have it in my hands. And, and I was at Penn State, big engineering school, and there's very different, like the associate degree was all hands-on, bachelor's degree was very like book driven, and they really didn't want like, oh, associate's degree, that's like vo-tech. And I should have been in the associate's program. I would have thrived there. And hindsight 2020, whatever. But
well, never too late. You know, a lot of people still do school and stuff. Mike in the chat mentions, aren't we here how to learn to monetize all the toys? It's certainly something that we do talk about from time to time. I'm not a big fan of, you know, well, let's reframe it this way. In more refined Pooch would advocate for having the plan first nowadays. If you're looking to set up a sustainable, successful business, obviously a little organization, a little planning and stuff like that will probably be a less perilous path, but there is no one right way. And as we always disclaim, we are still trying to figure it out ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you know, your path may be totally different. Okay. So today's theme, guys, is not reinventing the wheel. Okay. And I think that means a number of different things to makers. I posed the question in Twitter on Twitter earlier. Why is it? I want to lead off with this question. Actually, hold on a second. We're not doing our housekeeping properly. First, we have to do our wins for the week, and then I will ask you guys my question. Okay. So for those of you who are new to the podcast and joining us, we like to be positive and harness that good energy and all that stuff. And so we like to share something great that happened to us this week. And we're going to put Sean on the spot as well. So he's been thinking, man. I think he's been thinking, he's got so many great things happening. It's not going to be hard for him. But I'll let you go second, Sean. Andrew, you get to go first. And tell us about the amazing wave of Gloop that's been busting through the windows and out the doors and stuff this week?
Well, yeah, I mean, things here at Gloop have been great. I can't be, thankful enough for this amazing community to allow us to grow and do this sort of stuff. Big win for this week. It fits so perfectly in with this episode. As a small business that was bootstrapped, we always had to kind of hack or come up with a solution on our own, reinvent that wheel, if you will, instead of going out and buying a big industrial piece of equipment, because chemical manufacturing and process engineering, all of those things are very expensive.
Sure.
So this week we actually pulled the trigger on doing some much needed maintenance and improvements on some mission critical industrial equipment.
Oh, nice.
Basically paying a lot of money for what seems to be slightly overpriced, normal things, but manufacturing chemicals and adhesives, it's there's
it's pricey.
safety concerns, that sort of stuff. So
thankfully,
it's it's really good. It was a good feeling to actually be able to buy an official piece of equipment instead of trying to figure out, oh hey,
that's awesome.
Like, how can we make this in house?
Right. Yeah, the getting
Well,
away from the jank.
buying tools is never bad. That's always a win. So,
Yeah, exactly. All right, Sean, you're up. What was a great thing that happened, or a good thing?
This has been like a really stressful week. Working on a project, and it requires a lot of engineering and 3D printing work. And I didn't think there was any way I was going to make this deadline by today. And even with failed prints and last minute changes, I somehow managed to work out. And like that's just like I'm going into the weekend. Like I still have to work on it over the weekend, but I'm still like, whew, and like I feel a lot more relaxed than I have all week. So I think that is a big win.
That is a huge win, man. That is such a good feeling because sometimes we go into these things just not quite sure. I think the tendency to like underestimate how long things are going to take and all that.
Yes.
It's just it's so common. It's so common. For me, I'm going to go with we got a new revision of one of our storage boxes, the turntable product we're working on. We got that finishing out the door and launched, and I did a little marketing campaign, a little e-blast on that, and just kind of stepping forward. Nothing revolutionary, but getting out there, getting some good feedback on it and stuff like that. So I'll just take that as my win, and that's easy. What you guys in the chat, obviously, please feel free to share your wins, and I'll go back through in a little bit, and maybe we'll highlight some of your chats in here if you want. As always, like we say, if you want to feed us some questions, we will try to keep an eye on that. I can't promise that we'll get to everything. We do also have the Maker That Money hotline available. We will do the best we can to take calls as we have time as well, too. We're going to respect Sean's hour as best as possible we can here today because we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I'm flexible, so you do what you need to do.
Well, but you got your big printing project and you got to work over the weekend. I mean, we can't take too much of your time, but thank you for your flexibility. And he's powering through the coffee. Now, really quick, we were talking ahead of the show too. You're kind of a late night maker, huh? You're a night owl. Like that's when you do your big work.
I am. I work best when I'm like get up at 10 and then work until 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm trying to break that because that does put me at odds with like normal people's schedules, including my wife.
Well, that's important.
She's like, it's time for dinner, and I'm still here at 7-8 o'clock working. I'm like, my workday's not done.
Like it's lunchtime.
Yeah. But that's the best I ever operated was when I worked from 4 to midnight at Kinko's, and then stay up to like 4 and get up at noon. That's great for me. But I've been trying to get better about getting a little more normal, especially when I got to work with like Tippett and stuff is regular work hours. So I got to try to get on a better schedule, but it doesn't.
That's tough. Normal's kind of boring. I don't know. That's another great survey. I would love to see actually a more formal survey of like how many makers. I feel like makers tend to skew night owl, but maybe that's just, I don't know. I would say at different points in my life, I've gone both ways. I'm more like you know, when you get a little bit older and you have kids and other schedules and stuff like that, I started skewing like really early. So now I'm on the other end of the spectrum. So it's like, you never know.
It happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But back to again, we love to digress here. And you feel free to tell us in the chat if you're a night owl or a morning person, or both or neither. We're talking today about not reinventing the wheel. So my question for you guys, and the question that I posed to Twitter earlier this week, was, why as makers do you suppose we have a tendency to overly complicate and reinvent the wheel all the time? Is it because we just want to do all the things? Is it because we're not stopping to think of better ways? Is it because like we think that means better quality? What do you guys think? Sean, what do you think that's all about?
Well, I totally get it. I do it all the time. I think part of it's just like the satisfaction of like working out the problem yourself and like making it your own.
Yeah.
And and always the idea is like I could do it better. And like and then you're like, nope, I can't. I just think it's all those things. It's like sometimes you like legit see a better, like I think I could actually make the wheel better. And sometimes you never know, you figure something out. And then but a lot of it I think is just like making it your own, or making it personal. I think for like as far as like the maker community goes, because like right now you can go on like Thingiverse or anything and find like just about any gizmo, gadget, prop, replica. A lot of times I'm like, that's pretty good, but like I think I like, not necessarily I could do better, but like I want to make it my own. I want to do my own thing, and so like I won't print that easily printable Thingiverse thing, and I will reinvent the wheel.
Yep.
And do it myself, and sometimes to your detriment.
Sure. I think that's a common thing. I've done the same thing. Andrew, what are your thoughts and feels on this?
You know, I think it comes back to this. I call this term maker normalization. I think this is a concept that makers will oversimplify problems, and they'll just be like, oh hey, I know I can do this or whatever, and then they become overconfident in what they're, you know, trying to accomplish. And in many cases what ends up happening is they get into it and it costs them way more money and way more time than if they would have actually went out and bought something off the shelf. But as a maker, it's like, well, I'm all, you know, like I know how to do all of these things. And you know, it's like when all you have is a hammer, everything becomes a nail, right? And it's like, okay, I'm gonna go and do it this way because that's all I know how to do it. And so I think it's like this normalization process that we all go through. And it's like, oh well, I'll just do it myself before actually looking into it and actually thinking through and applying any critical thinking to it.
Yeah. We're seeing a number of people in the chat saying the same thing. Mitch brings up a good point. Mitch 3D says because he's broke and he spends more money and time building something he could buy pre-assembled with support.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So you were just talking about that as your win, even that we don't always have the luxury of having the funds to actually buy the right tool for the job oftentimes. So there's that. And there's honestly, to me, this is such an embodiment of the maker spirit because the journey is half the fun a lot of the time, right? It's like, even if we are reinventing the wheel, like the attempt to do so, and if we come to the conclusion that it was like a waste of time or whatever, but it's like that's what we live for a lot of the time anyway. So there's value in that still, right? That's my feeling.
And I think some of it, like you were saying, is sometimes it's reinventing the wheel because of the tools that you know.
Right.
And like a great example, I worked at NYU. I worked above a program that was like, it combined like art and electronics and programming.
Okay.
And and one day the kids were freaking out because the 3D printer was down and he couldn't print his part. And he shows the professor, it's literally like a square plate with a hole in it. and the guy's like, just grab the plate of like just do
drill
that
press
on the jigsaw and drill press. He's
yeah.
like, I don't know how to use those. And so like so sometimes I think just reinventing the wheel is you're reinventing it in terms of what you're familiar with and how you know how to do it.
That's exactly right. And we see that with 3D printing all the time because it is such an accessible tool that you can throw so many things at, right? So it's interesting, but I was a web developer for 15 years before this, and I can't tell you how many arguments I would get over like working with other programmers, software developers, all this stuff, where they'd be like, "This is the right. We need to use Java for this, or we need to use COBOL or what COBOL, not COBOL, but
Oh, jeez.
yeah, old school, like right, Fortran. Yeah, we bust up Python or something like that, and there'd be like all this argument over it, and really what that was just like people like kind of expressing like their comfort zone. A lot of the time, it's like they just wanted to advocate for the tool that they knew. Right. It's not to say that there's any one right or wrong tool. It's just with the familiarity. So I understand that we do that as well. It's like, hey, I've got a drill press or I've got a jigsaw, or I've got a 3D printer. Like I'm going to use those tools. So maybe that's part of the answer as well. Like you were just saying, Sean. Okay, so let's take this into entrepreneurship now, because this is one of these, like, you do this at your own peril when this becomes your livelihood, and you don't always have the luxury of time or the money or resources to just aimlessly work on all these little digressions and reinventions of the wheel all the time, right? So Sean, you mentioned that you run a pretty. If you guys haven't seen it, by the way, there are links to Sean's Etsy shop are in the description, as well as his project website and stuff like that. Please go check it out. He has got a ton of interesting stuff on there. But my question to you is, as a entrepreneur, as you've started getting into like sale of product and all that stuff, what have you learned about, taking this, maybe resisting the maker mentality and trying to find components that are either easier to source or easier to make, or not going down this path?
Well, I should preface this first by saying I had no intention of like running a shop that like I could, like, if I didn't live in the Bay Area, I could almost live off of it. We were talking about the ghost trap. So I designed this ghost trap for it was a tested project. They sponsored by Dremel, and they just wanted us to make something cool that with their printer. And so I decided to do a ghost trap. I teamed with our buddy Jeremy Williams from Tested, who's really good with electronics. And I was like, "Can you make this work?"
Yeah.
So I figured out the mechanics. And
hold it up. Show us what you were talking about. Yeah. So for those watching on YouTube, this thing is legit, guys. I got to see this. You can even hear it. There's smoke coming out. I'm going to describe, because we are a podcast as well. Full like electronics package, smoke coming out of the I mean, it looks like
awesome.
I feel like he just released a soul into the universe when he opened that thing.
So I designed it that you could completely 3D print it, but I also designed everything around the real world components. So like if you wanted to swap out as many real things to make it as movie accurate, you could do that, or you could 3D print everything except for the fasteners.
Yeah.
So I released the files for free. They're on Thingiverse. And I like wrote up little how-to guides, and I provided a hardware list. And what I very quickly realized was that it was very difficult it's all socket head screws and stuff like that. You can't go out to Home Depot and just pick these up. Maybe if you have like a fasten all around, but even then I found some of them are obscure enough. So I started I was like, well, maybe I could offer hardware kits. So I started putting together nuts and bolt kits. My wife and I watching a movie and sorting screws, like,
oh man.
And so I started offering those, and they were selling really well. And then I start getting more and more questions. So I started adding. I was like, oh, I guess that I think about how much time I spent tracking all this stuff down, and it's difficult. And so I started offering the kits on the shop, and it just kind of took off from there. I will also say I do have a built-in advantage because I am on Tested. A lot of times the projects that we're showing, my shop gets mentioned or whatever. So I have an advantage over other people in that way, and I realize that.
But let me pause on that for a second, because we've talked about this in the past with Clayton, Uncle Jesse, and all that stuff too, and the importance of sales and marketing. It's that we run into that field of dreams syndrome a lot of times, where amazingly talented products and stuff that are out there, but rarely do you have a sales problem. You have like an awareness problem, right? And so a lot of times, like finding ways to get your stuff featured, and that's why influencer marketing is so important. We talk about the value of using social media, using other makers and stuff. You
Yeah.
are part of an actual niche of a niche in the maker community, in the Ghostbusters prop building community, which is
Right.
actually fairly robust. I mean, I kind of came to you, through like Punish Props and Ben Eady, and like a lot of those guys are building proton packs. Chris Magdalena, there's a number of people that in the maker community that are super into these really movie realistic Ghostbuster props and stuff like that. And your trap obviously being featured on Tested was huge, but the community is well aware of your work and that. And I love hearing about the evolution and your story that is so common to all of us, where it's like, I kind of fell into entrepreneurship in a way. Like I wasn't planning to, start a store. It's a good story.
So I think, okay, remind me of what we're talking about.
Not reinventing the wheel. So you started with a 3D printable version, and then over time you've started to source other components. And I've seen some of these.
And deciding what to have in the shop and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what I very quickly realized that offering, like, I get often asked, like, oh, do you build fully built traps?
Yep.
And I did that for a little bit, and it's not sustainable for one person working out of their spare bedroom.
Sure.
It's too much work, and I find that a lot of people that I see who are offering stuff like that are undervaluing their time and skills and effort greatly. Yep. I find it's a general problem in 3D printed stuff in general.
Well,
they're not
in
calculating like how much time am I spending on this, like how much electricity is all these machines running, like all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And so I very quickly nixed, like, I do not offer built kits. Plus, I hate to say this too, because I am part of the community, but the prop community has a very wide, like, there's the I bought a Spirit Halloween ghost trap and I'm perfectly happy with it as is.
Yeah.
There's the I bought a Spirit Halloween trap and I want to make it look better
Yep.
than it is, like it has potential. There's the I want every nut and bolt from 1984 down, like
actually used in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a wide range there, and what I found was that selling fully built traps, you got into a danger where some people are thrilled with it, and then you get people like, this isn't accurate enough, and then you just get into arguments, and like I'm very much like Adam, where I do like things being accurate. I do appreciate that, but like I'm more interested in, does it feel right to me, and does it capture the spirit of the thing? So I'm a little loose with that stuff, which some people don't like.
Sure.
So I felt the kit thing was more sustainable because it catered to all of those people for the most part, and it was easier to do. I could, I mean, it's a lot of work counting screws and putting all that stuff together, but it was a lot easier than building full traps and offering them like that. So
that's a fantastic point.
I like, and I'm also coming from the DIY maker thing where like it is fun to build a ghost trap. Like you don't want to build a fully built one, like build one yourself. It's so much more fun. And I realize that's intimidating to people.
Right.
So one of the things that I tried to do that not everybody does is I try to write guides for everything, like full of pictures, step by step. This is how you do it. It's written for the layman. Because I remember growing up buying like build your own robot books, and it's like, oh, that's awesome. And you get it, and it's like buy all these obscure things without the internet, and Radio Shack has it, and you're like, and it was just a book of disappointment. It's like this isn't obtainable at all, and I hated that so much, and so I try to approach the kits that I'm offering like, you can do this. All the documentation's here. It's obtainable. You can do it, and I try to take that approach to it. So
you bring up so many good points in this, and some that we've kind of talked about in the past, and some like I kind of like I don't feel like we've really dove into, but the notion of offering a product where you're trying to be, first of all, it's impossible to be everything for everyone. You don't know, and the onus of marketing your stuff in a way that's as like clear cut as possible, obviously, because falls on us as the entrepreneur, right? Like, this is a kit, you're gonna have an opportunity, like, here's what we recommend, but like, for those that want to make it more their own, they can, but
Yeah.
you're gonna come across. I mean, I was doing the whole like, oh my gosh, kill me now when you're talking about design guides and stuff like that, because we sell predominantly kits as well, and the just like coming up with a way that works for everybody's mindset, and even and learning how
Is
to assemble stuff is
so
so
hard.
hard, right? Some people like, I want to watch a video and follow along. Other people
Yeah.
need that printed manual. Other people want to
Yeah.
see some combination of the two. I don't know. And it's just maddening, and you spend so much time and energy
Yeah.
trying to do all of that stuff. So I know, yeah, you're shaking your head furiously,
Oh,
like,
man.
yeah, you get it.
It's another thing in the shop that I try to do is I hate shops that you go and it's like, you know, uh, the listing is a picture Ghostbuster vector plate, and it's just that's it. That's the listing.
No
I'm like,
context. Yeah.
what? And so I probably am on I am on the opposite end where I'm maybe a little too verbose
Okay.
because I try to pack in as much information for the customer as possible.
Right.
What I've discovered, there's a lot of people in the internet age do not read anything.
Oh my
And
God. Is that so
holy
true?
Yes.
cow, that's a
They,
struggle.
they
And
just look at pictures. Yeah.
yeah, and so I run into the problem a lot of time of listings where I want to show this component in situ, like this is how it's used on the trap,
Right.
and people buy something for $5 and it's like, this isn't a full ghost trap.
Oh my
And I'm
God.
like, oh my god. And
Yeah. It
so
says
that's a
kit.
constant,
It says
that's
kit on the thing. Yeah. Yeah.
it's such a constant struggle. Like how do I cover my butt, explain things well, don't explain things too much. Like, oh my god,
Mhm.
it's a dance. It's a constant dance.
It really is.
Absolutely.
And at some point, if it becomes too much of a headache, we see so many makers like falling to like, it's just not worth doing this anymore, right? Like, I didn't, especially when you didn't set out for this to be like your job, and then you
Yeah.
realize, I just spent the last 3 weekends sitting in front of the TV bagging screws and like all this stuff. So I want to
Yeah.
get into that in a second, but I want to stay with another thing that you'd said really quick. So when you were doing the design originally, or 3D printing and stuff, some of the things that I was really impressed by when I got to hold and operate the trap at Silicon when we were chatting last year was you had started to source these really cool little parts, and I would start to be like, wait a minute, is that like a little brass valve off of this or whatever? You were really good at finding some interesting off the shelf items that worked well in this design and giving people something a little bit more robust than just a printed piece of plastic.
Yeah. I can't I can take credit for finding things,
Yeah.
but I can't take credit for that fully because a lot of that was I was literally matching what they used in 1984. Because they would
Mm.
a lot of the special effects guys, they go to these junk stores and aircraft surplus stores
Yeah.
and just grab whatever cool looking crap they could find and make a cool looking prop.
Yeah.
So most of the stuff like that is accurate to the film.
That's cool though.
And there's a huge community built around tracking this stuff down. So GB Fans is one of my favorite places to go to.
Okay.
And they literally have lists of like, this was the original part. Here's the part number, and
Oh, wow.
the problem. Now the problem you run into is a lot of that stuff, even if they have the part number, it's so old and obscure. It's
Yeah.
it's unobtainium.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are certain things that I have to source something very similar, and that is where my skill set comes in, like finding like, and the skill set is basically brute forcing, looking at eBay and electronic stores hour after hour after hour, scrolling through pictures, and then some of it is just finding like a lot of times you can find the part, but the most easily found version of it is off the most common site that pops up, and it costs 10 times as much as like if you find like the manufacturer or like some industrial supply place that sells it in bulk,
Right.
Yeah.
stuff like that. And so that's the skill set, is like is like being the patience to track all this stuff down.
and and that is a skill set. And Andrew, I want you to talk about that because you've helped me with sourcing and stuff. Sourcing as
Mm-hmm.
as an entrepreneur is like a frustrating endeavor a lot of the time, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it is a lot of work, and there's research and calling and dealing with
Yep.
various suppliers that have different capabilities. So it's like a lot of what you're doing too is, like you said, when you can buy in bulk, you're kind of doing a service to this community of people that would not go out and spend the 10x or whatever that it takes, but now you're making it more affordable for people. And
Yeah.
there are so many little neat business opportunities in just that, right? If you're gonna like do the work of finding these things and creating a bill of materials, a bomb, like,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a robust enough community, there are so many cool opportunities for businesses if that is a skill set that you possess. Andrew, do you want to talk a little bit about sourcing and being
Yeah.
creative in that, and like where to go look for stuff that, you know, because you're a wizard at it, honestly.
I don't know about a wizard, but
I say you're level 77 wizard.
I mean, yeah. So
Warlock.
really, what it comes down to for most sourcing is it's a learning process. I think that you have to understand like that you might know the idea or the piece that you're looking for, but sometimes it's called something else, or
Oh
sometimes
god,
there's
yes.
technical names or whatever. And as you're digging, like I think of it as like kind of it's like a research project in a sense where
Yeah.
you're scratching the surface at first, you're getting some information, and then you're like, okay, I could take this information, maybe I can add in a couple keywords, maybe I can figure out like who are some of the big suppliers for these things in the
Yeah.
specific space. Like for us, when we're looking for some very specific reagents for making chemicals and stuff, like there's the big Sigma Aldrich where we get a lot of our stuff from, but there are some specialty compounds that if you go to Sigma Aldrich, they charge out the wazoo for things.
Yeah.
Like if we were to buy reagents
Ruin your
from them,
wazoo.
it's ridiculous. And we don't need ultra pure reagents. We can get tactical grade. And so this is where like at the very
Tactical
beginning
grade.
of Gloop, like we actually did a lot of research finding out, oh hey, what kind of product that we could get off the shelf that has a chemical in it that we can actually extract and actually convert into another
No
chemical.
way.
Creative, dude. I love that.
That's amazing.
Legitimately.
Okay.
Yeah, so it comes down to like doing a little bit of research, putting in the time, putting in the effort, like what is it that you're looking for, and then learning the trade names, the technical names,
Yeah.
specifically for items like with our industrial equipment. We have these pumps that actually move our reagents from large vats over into our reactors,
Okay.
and these
Like a
pumps are
peristaltic or
incredibly.
something
It's
no.
sort of, but it's a little bit different. These are air driven pumps, and they
Okay.
have PTFE pistons, and they're very complicated.
Oh wow.
And they're expensive because they use a lot of really high tech material, and there's some decent engineering that goes into these. But there are parts on it like pressure regulating valves, right? Oh, you think it's a normal pressure regulator? No, these are not normal pressure regulators. These are deionizing or deionized material handling pressure regulators. If you don't add those extra keywords, you won't even get to these things.
Yeah.
You won't even, and you start looking at how expensive this stuff gets,
Yeah.
and then like for one of these pressure regulators, if we were to buy it new, you're talking $2,000, $3,000. Now you can get the part number. You might be able to go to eBay. You might be able to find things used.
Right.
But when you actually start looking at all of the components of it, you can actually build one out of a bunch of other parts. And so you again, it's all about research of like figuring out what it is that you're trying to accomplish and kind
Yeah.
of working backwards
Yeah.
until you get to the simplest component, and then learning the keywords, the trade names, whatever it might be, and then
Oh
building up
man.
from there.
That's a lot of work too. So Sean, talk about
It is.
your experience with sourcing and stuff. You're laughing along because I know you've been through this same path.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like I didn't
man.
even know this thing was even
That's
called
on
that.
another level from what I'm getting. I'm getting
Yeah.
nuts and bolts, but
Yeah.
so here's some good tips. And this applies to DIYers or somebody trying to put together a little shop with their stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you guys have talked about this before. McMaster Car,
Yeah.
big industrial supply place. The catalog is like this thick,
Love
and you cannot. obtain catalogs. If you go on eBay, you can maybe buy a catalog for like $100.
Yeah.
But
Collector's
it's a
item.
great learning tool. I can't tell you how much I've learned from McMaster, because they have everything industrial,
Right.
and every single section has a blurb at the beginning, like about screws, about
Yeah.
threaded inserts, and
Sure.
it's really, really educational. It's a really good place to just learn about stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's a good place to start. The other nice thing about McMaster is most things like fasteners and everything that you can download directly from it, 3D models.
Oh, which is
That's
so great.
integrated into Fusion 360 now,
Right.
but if you're not using that,
Yeah.
it's great to get models of things. So if you're building stuff or need stand-ins or whatever.
Yeah.
Now my and they'll deliver it like next day, like just standard shipping.
Yeah.
The follow-up to that is, don't buy from McMaster Car.
They're very expensive.
Like
Yes.
that's not true. But
Yeah.
like what I found is like fasteners and stuff like that tend to be really expensive on
Sure.
McMaster Car.
Sure.
So it's a great learning tool. It's a great way to find things, but not everything is a great deal on there. So I still do buy certain things for the kits and stuff on McMaster, but like for fasteners,
Yeah.
Bolt Depot. Bolt Depot is the place to go to because they have most all the common stuff.
Yeah.
It's like a fraction of the price of McMaster, and you can buy literally one screw.
Yeah.
Which is very uncommon. Usually it's got to be like 50, 20, 100, whatever. And so Bolt Depot is my go-to for just finding just general fasteners and stuff.
I'll add to that, although you can't do the one. So Bolt Depot is great. I'll totally echo that. I use one called Fastener Superstore for our bulk stuff.
I'm writing this down.
Write this down. So usually they have carton minimums, right? So depending on like what it is, 2,500, 5,000. But if you're doing stuff like Sean's doing, you'll burn through 5,000 of these, in no time.
It's definitely ramped up over time. It's like, oh, I'll buy enough for 50 kits, 100 kits. Yeah, it's just.
But my God, did you have that notion, you and your wife, sitting down, it's like, you don't realize like how much 100 of something really is until you have to like put them into a bag, and you're like,
no.
And then, yeah. Have you started playing with like those automated screw counters yet, or vibe bowls and all that?
So this is a good thing. I think when you're doing this stuff, you need to be brutally honest with yourself. It's like, is this particular thing worth offering or making?
Yes.
And there have been things in the past that I had in the shop, and I'm like, I love this going out into the world, and I love this getting into people's hands, but it is not worth the effort or time to do it. It's just not enough return on investment. And like I said, you have to calculate in your time with that. So sometimes it's just like, not carrying this anymore, or sometimes you got to figure out better ways to do it. So counting screws, for example, in the early days, it was literally like,
you were doing, and then you're like, I'm going to weigh these.
So I have looked into, basically what I use now are counting scales.
Yeah.
So that's there are counting machines, but then you're talking about big bulky stuff and expensive. And I cannot justify the cost of those at this stage in my shop.
I'm going to give you another pro tip here, because it's funny because these are like the stages of grief, but for like kidding. So we were the same way. It's like at first it was like hand counting because it was just like, oh, you only needed 10 of these or whatever, and then you realize like as demand ramps up, you kind of, and this is okay, guys, too. Like I think you should actually go through this process to get a better feel for that. But same thing. Got counting scales. Got kind of how can we get even better? If you go on eBay and you search for screw counting machines, this doesn't work for all fasteners, but for a lot of like socket heads and stuff like that, for about $180 to $200, there's these just little clever rotary wheel vibratory things, like actually pretty reasonably priced, and an optical sensor, and it'll just kind of shovel them out into a bucket, and you can just say, count 100 for me and stuff. So that opens up some interesting opportunities. I've looked at either pairing that with like a rotary carousel. Sean, we got to talk a little bit more about this because we do a lot of that stuff.
I would love to.
Yeah,
I
and
love
it's
it.
I
Yeah.
geek out on the automation
So
side of things.
so finding tools like the
Yeah,
counting scales were a cheap, easy
right.
way, like
Mm-hmm.
like $10 or less on Amazon, and I got like 6 of them laid out. And
Yeah,
that really sped things up, and that really helps a lot. So
yeah.
like that, I 3D printed special little trays
We
with
did
little
the same
chutes
thing.
on them to
Yep,
put them
yep,
in the bags.
yep,
Yeah,
yep.
like
Yeah.
just dumb stuff like that. Like it's amazing how much easier it makes and how much less painful. The number one thing that I bought, which is like a game changer, was I offer all these the proton packs for Ghostbusters have all this tubing on it,
Yeah.
and I was cutting it by hand. I was like that this blows,
Yep.
and so I
The
got a
cutting machine.
tubing cutter,
Yeah, I've got
Yep.
one
and I
too. I
got
love that
Yep.
thing.
I found a $1,000 tubing cutter for $100
Oh,
on eBay because it was
score.
broken.
Yeah, yeah,
So I looked up the company. They're in like Minnesota. I was like, "Do you guys service this? How much it would cost to service?" And they're like, "Here's the max it would cost, like if it was like just destroyed."
yeah,
I'm like, "All right." So I bought the $100 broken tubing cutter.
yeah,
It's only like this big, but it weighs like 20 pounds because it's got like a steel
yeah.
plate in it like that.
Yeah.
And I sent it off. Got it serviced for $400. So I got like $1,000 tubing cutter for $500 total, and like it's like, oh my god, you just
Winning.
punch it
That's
in
a
and walk
win.
away.
That was your win. Yeah.
So good.
Mm-hmm.
So like just looking for ways to um to use up less of your time,
Right.
because like that's like, I'll repeat it again, not enough people calculate their time put in on doing this stuff. And
Yep.
Let's
so
let's
evaluating things that
go
you
ahead.
are not worth the time and finding ways to make things easier and quicker to put together.
Fantastic advice. Let's stay on the
Mm-hmm.
valuing of time, and we've had episodes dedicated to this before,
Oh
and we
yes.
will have them in the future as well, because it's like this is the one thing that we need everybody as a maker to hear. Like, you need to value your time properly. It's the same thing for
Mm-hmm.
artists and all of this stuff. Like, you're doing a disservice to the greater community when you give away your services and your time and you allow the people that complain. Sean, how many times have people said like, I can source all these parts for like only $10, and like, why are you charging $100 for that? I mean, because
Because
I had to bag them all. Like,
I
I don't have my
spent 2
beeper.
days finding them on the internet. I spent hundreds of dollars buying giant bulk bags of them,
Yeah.
and then I sit and wipe all the oil off of them, and then I sit
Oh my
and
gosh.
count hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them.
Yeah. Because pay
Yep.
me for my time. Yeah, that's the other thing in the maker world too. It's like, if there's one thing I just want to shout into the void like endlessly, it's like the cost of a product is so much more than the sum of its parts. Like, it's
Yeah.
not
Mm-hmm.
just material cost. It's
Yeah.
in fact, that is a small fraction, right? Like, when you look at especially if you're talking about labor in California, or the Bay
Oh.
Area of California. I grew up in the Bay Area, so I know full well what Sean's talking about when he's like,
Yeah.
it is an expensive place to live and work. And that's
Mhm.
why we don't see a lot of manufacturing and stuff. So we're trying to play in that space where it's like, a lot of these jobs have been automated or outsourced to China, but there's not enough demand, but there is demand. And you're like, we're in this
Mhm.
weird, like, in the wilderness, in the Rubicon here, in some of these things where it's successful, but it's not quite successful enough, and you're not quite sure if it's going to work and grow. I don't know.
Yeah.
What are your feels on? Like, I threw a ton at you there. The sum of the
Yeah.
parts, the
I mean-
bomb. Talk about that, because I know you've heard that before.
What's that?
The people saying like, how do you charge so much for this? Because
Oh,
the
yeah.
bomb is not that big.
I do get that, and my response is, so like I said, I released the 3D files for free, and so
That's
part
even
of
worse.
it is that so I released the 3D files for free, and it includes a hardware list. Like, these are the nuts and bolts you need.
Yeah.
So my response to that is like, the list is in the 3D files. Go to town, like, go find them.
Mhm.
And I did the research, and like to go out and like get all those individual nuts and bolts and pay the shipping and everything. Like, all of a sudden my prices for the kit is actually not unreasonable at all. And the fact that just the time you're going to spend trying to hunt down all these parts
Right.
is
Mhm.
difficult. And like, I'm like, so like my response is kind of like, well, the parts list is there, go for it. And then there are times when that like a few weeks later that person circles back around and buys the kit.
Yeah.
uh
Oh yeah.
and that's part of my thinking with offering this stuff, is that I'm really busy and like life is crazy, and like I love building things, but man, I do not have the I want it like to be a Lego kit. Like, here, just build this.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
And I try to approach the stuff I'm offering like that, is like, you don't have to spend the time reading through prop forums and figuring out what to
Right.
get. Like, this is what you need, and go have fun. And so that's kind of the approach on that as well. And um yeah, like it is what it is. And there are times where, another good example is like, I sell door mechanism kits for the doors that open and close on
Right.
the
Yeah.
on thing, and I include the servos with it.
Okay.
And that is because originally I didn't, because that's one of the bigger expenses of the kit.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was finding, so the programming that I released the Arduino code for free. So if you just want to go mess around and figure it out, you can.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But it's written for analog servos. So all of these people were buying digital servos, which doesn't work with the
Mm.
code at all. And they're like, I bought your kit and this thing doesn't work. And I'm like, what? I don't. And I'm trying to troubleshoot this via email, and I'm not an electronics guy, so like my help there is limited.
Yeah.
And like I finally figured out what was going on. I'm like, oh, there's a variable I didn't think about. So I just
Got a
now
control over
Mm-hmm.
all
only
of it.
sell them with the servos, and people are like, yeah, can I buy the kit without the servos? I'm like, nope, sorry, I'm sorry, I can't guarantee your results then.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Well, yeah, we've had kits that I've very like explicitly disclaimed, like, this is an open source project. We offer no support. Like, here is the plan. And I've said in the past too, like, the customer support, like, and the amount of time, because you want to talk about like time suck potentially. Think
Yep.
about
Yeah.
how many emails you're getting. It's like, you're sharing what you've learned and you want to see this community succeed and you're happy about that. But I guarantee you probably have the same feel as I do. It's like, I don't want to be answering emails around this. I would actually like offered a lot of the things that we do at less of a price if I didn't have to do all the documentation. I'm like, hey, if you just want to figure this out, like, here you go. You can have it cheaper because I don't want to deal with that. But to go back to you do have to offer some degree of customer support. Obviously, people's skills vary wildly, right?
Yeah.
So some people
Yeah.
have way more ability to figure it out on their own, and other people are like, that little scene in A Bug's Life where it's like the stick falls in front of them and they're like, I'm lost, like, I can't, like, and it's so hard to deal with that breadth of audience. So tell me what it is, how you approach your customer service with this, given again that this wasn't really what you set up and intended to do originally.
Yeah, so I try to put in as many safeguards as possible to circumvent that, because the problem I run into is this shop originally started as parts for my 3D printed trap. Then Spirit Halloween and Walmart put out a nice little, like, $40 ghost trap replica. And it was great. People who wanted a ghost trap could get something that looked reasonably okay for cheap.
Yeah.
But it created a whole new thing where it's like, hey, do these parts that you're selling for your trap work on the Spirit trap? And I'm like, oh. But I kept getting more and more questions about it. I'm like, and then you see like, oh, there's some potential to maybe make some more sales that way.
Right.
Yeah.
But that means I got to go buy a whole bunch of Spirit traps and figure out how they work and figure out if it does work with that.
Yeah.
Do I want to do that? And so sometimes I put a disclaimer like, does not work with Spirit trap, or like you have to like add in all these layers of like,
and even then they won't read it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Works with this, doesn't work with this. But once again, people don't read a lot of the time, so that is, but that's 50.
Yep.
So it's inevitably somebody buys like, I bought this and it doesn't fit on my Spirit trap. I'm like, I'm sorry, but please read the very first line of the listing. Does not work with Spirit trap. And I'm like, I'm happy to take the return. So that happens sometimes.
Have you? Quick question on that. I've run into the same thing. I've actually started considering like actually putting the text on the image if it's like a substantial enough
That's
warning, where
that's
it's
exactly
like
what my wife told me to do.
honestly
Yeah,
like, and even then
yeah.
somehow people would probably still miss it.
It was a big like, oh, you're right.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I should do that. It's just another layer of work, though.
yeah, I know.
Um,
And hand
and then
holding.
the other thing,
Go ahead.
this is a overall Etsy is a pretty good platform.
Okay.
I'm to the point where I need to move on to something else. However, what like because one of my biggest problems with Etsy is I have a very complicated like it's complicated. There's lots of kits. It goes with my 3D printed trap. I can't
Mhm.
post the 3D files on Etsy if they're free. It's just like it's super annoying and complicated. And there technically Etsy has a section where you can create an FAQ, but it's worthless because it's buried. There's no button anywhere for it. It's buried at the very end of your like you got to scroll through the entire
Yeah.
top. So sometimes you got to figure out ways to cheat the system. Like so, I created a listing
Yeah.
that is the FAQ. So it's the very first listing on the shop. It has an image that says Ghost GB parts FAQ. It's not a it's just an easy way for people to read through things and it links to all the other kits in the shop.
Right. You've created a little
Mm.
So
hack.
you
Yeah.
gotta figure out ways to do that. It would be easier if I had my own website that I could tailor it however I wanted. But that's the best I could do on Etsy.
Okay, so that's a great thing. So two questions for you. One,
Mhm.
Mars Gizmo asked, what percentage of your time do you think goes into the support for this?
Surprisingly, not as much as I would have thought.
Then you're doing a
And
good job, my friend. I was
I think,
yeah.
I think part of that is one of the things that I did is, like I said, for everything that I put out, there's almost always a guide, like a picture write up, like how to do it, how to walk through,
Mhm.
and that really went a long way to not getting as many questions because I tried to write a clear, concise, make sense guide, and most people seem to muddle through with it okay.
Okay.
Um, I've had a huge uptick because Hasbro released a proton pack of their own,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and
Oh.
then Adam put it on tested, and he did a bunch of his own upgrades for it.
Right.
And I've been bombarded with people.
Every time another light shines on the
And
project,
Mhm.
right?
the
Yeah.
problem I ran into is I carry parts for my trap, and I carry generic Ghostbusters parts.
Yeah.
And everybody
Mhm.
came there thinking I was a Hasbro pack shop and
Okay.
not understanding
Mm.
why they bought everything that I had and it doesn't work with the pack. And then I had the back put. I was like, oh my god, I see what's happening here. So then had to put all disclaimers and more information in every single listing that this will
Ah.
work, this won't work. I don't own a HasLab pack. I don't know what to tell you.
Oh my
Like
gosh.
so, unforeseen consequences pop up like that, and that created a lot of. I was just answering messages and emails like bonkers. And so I have canned responses for a lot of that you can save on Etsy, for example.
Sure.
So, and then that's the other reason I created the FAQ. Like I kept getting these same questions over and over and over again. And so I'll just like, please see this section of the FAQ. If you have more questions, don't hesitate to ask.
Yeah.
Um, and those are the things that I tried to do but
Yeah.
and
So let's talk about Etsy for a second. That was my second question. I flippantly love to say to people like be better than Etsy because there's a lot of
Mhm.
frustration. I completely understand that it is a very easy low hanging fruit place to get your start, and we see a lot of makers
Yep.
starting there because like they don't want to waste time. We talk about minimum viable product on this podcast a lot. And
yeah,
so
Yep.
as a starting point, I have no problem with it, or whatever your
Mhm.
platform might be. Maybe it's Tindy Makerspace, maybe it's any of those things, right?
yeah,
Just get it out there and focus on getting some attention and stuff first. But my question for you is, what are the indicators for people to know when they've grown beyond the needs of these like off the shelf platforms? This is kind of another way of looking at this. Are we reinventing the wheel? We don't want to spend time creating a custom
yeah,
website,
Mhm.
yeah.
but there's probably something in between as well. What do you think, Sean?
Um, well, so the reason I started with Etsy, so this is like my original Etsy shop was 2013, and at that time, there really wasn't a ton of options
Yeah.
for starting up your own shop.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sure.
there were other things, but a lot of them I hadn't heard of, or like there weren't as many options for setting up your shop as Etsy
Sure.
and stuff. And Etsy was very it still is, but like very at that point, Etsy was hardcore, like arts and crafts, like
Yeah.
it was
Like
kind of a weird thing to put on
handcrafted.
Etsy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was the best alternative that I could find to get my stuff out there.
Sure.
So that's why I started with it, and they have increased their platform, like the options on the shop platform, and overall, it's not too bad
Okay.
as far as setting up things or whatever. The problem I'm running into is dumb limitations that, like, for example, like
The FAQs.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
Hmm.
FAQs, or like you can't have something in your shop that's sold out, which is a constant frustration. So like
How can you not be sold out?
right, because it's because Etsy originally started as arts and crafts, so like it's a one-off beautiful Afghan that you hand knitted,
Ah.
so there's never going to be
Hmm.
one like it.
There's no inventory
Yeah.
mechanism.
Right. So now
Interesting.
you can list something and say there's a quantity of 20, but
Right.
when that reaches 0,
Y-
it just completely disappears from your shop, which
Ah.
Yeah.
is a nightmare, because
Hmm.
probably
I
the
didn't
number
know that.
one
Okay.
yeah, probably the number one thing I have to deal with is people's like, "Hey, this thing's gone from your shop. Did you stop carrying it? Or are you gonna have it again?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's on back order. I just can't list it as it's just
Yeah.
stupid." And I one of the other things that I refuse to take pre-orders. I will not sell anything that I do
Mm.
not have on hand
Man,
because it stresses
Hmm.
me
I've been bit by that bug multiple
out.
times, man. I
So
hear you.
so it's that's my number one biggest annoyance with Etsy, is that you cannot list something as 0 inventory. It just disappears.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
that causes all kinds of problems, because Etsy does allow you to link to other listings within,
That's it.
other
Oh,
listings. So
okay.
I'm like, if you're buying this, you might want this to go with it.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden it's a dead link because it's
Right.
out of stock right now. It's so stupid.
Well, and that's a manual process.
Yeah.
So a true
Yeah.
e-commerce package is going to allow you to do cross sells, upsell, linkages, all kinds of
Exactly.
other
And then
Yeah.
stuff.
like it
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
restricts you. You can create categories, so like Proton Pack,
Right,
Ghost Trap,
right.
but it only allows you to do one category per item.
Yeah,
So like things that might show up in both for a Proton Pack and a trap, that can't do it. And it's like, this is so stupid.
yeah,
Um, I sell a smoke pump for the Ghost Trap. Now it uses e-cigarettes. I do not sell e-cigarettes.
yeah,
It's a pump with
yeah,
tubing,
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
and
yeah.
that continually is delisted because it has the word smoke in it. And like, we don't
Uh-huh.
allow vaping products on our site. I'm like, oh my god.
Somebody's going to
Just
turn your ghost trap into a bong. And
Yeah.
so
yeah,
dumb stuff like that. You fight against a lot. And I am to the point where I need to move to a different platform. I
right.
just haven't figured out
Hmm.
what that is yet, and it's such a huge undertaking. And like I said, this isn't my full time job.
Yep.
It's something I'm doing on the side. Like my actual personal like website
Yeah.
is the blog that I started in grad school to document my build progress, and it's a freaking disaster. And like I
Let
haven't
me
had time to fix either of those things.
let me tell you something, my friend.
Yeah.
I told you I was a web developer in the past. Like the last website I ever had time to work on was my own, and so it was like an embarrassment, like how
Oh,
old and antiquated it was compared to some of
oh
the
yeah,
high tech stuff I was doing all over the place. So I completely understand that feeling. But
yeah.
again, minimum viable product. Sometimes just having a place for the information to get out is good. You're off to a good start. You have
Hmm.
semi-workable solution, but obviously you've identified some limitations. There's some people making some suggestions in the chat. I have no idea if these are any good or not, but they're saying that maybe there's the premium version of Etsy might unlock some additional
No,
features.
garbage. It's
Okay.
oh,
Sean
yeah.
says,
Uh,
Andrew, Sean says your idea is garbage.
no,
Okay.
no, and
No, I'm just,
Andrew,
I'm
that
just
is that
teasing.
technically that is good. And he was right. I actually signed up for that. So they offer like an upgrade package
Yeah.
for Etsy where you can show things out of stock. However, the only way that works is if it truly sells out. So let's say your inventory count was off,
Yeah.
right? So you thought you had 5, but you only had 4, so you sell out. You're sold out, but there's one listed in the shop still. So you're like, okay, I'll just mark that,
Yeah,
deactivate
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Well, it doesn't. If you do that manually, it's just gone. Then it doesn't show sold out. The only way it will show sold out on the page is if it truly sells out on Etsy. And I'm just like, you guys, you introduce something that seems good and then you mess it
Just
up.
didn't get it right.
And so I did try that out, and I was just like, oh my god.
Ugh,
Uh,
that's
so
frustrating.
Etsy is a good starting spot. It has a lot of good things going for it, but I have out. I
You've
need to
outgrown
move
it.
on to something else.
You've outgrown it.
hmm
Well, I'm sure you've done, the research and stuff. The good news for you, my friend, is there are so many better options in this day and age than there
Oh,
ever
I
were
know.
before.
There's almost too many now. I'm like, oh
Right.
god, I don't know what to
hmm
pick.
I'm a big advocate.
Yep.
I'm a big advocate for Shopify. We use that, and it handles. It's not perfect. I think any number of these things are going to have their weird,
It-
quirky
yeah,
limitations. So you're
hmm
never going to get it entirely right. But
yeah.
I will say that I am impressed with how much improvement that I've seen Shopify even put into the system since we've started with it for like
That's that's
incre-
always a good
like they're
sign.
developing it, right?
Yeah.
And at the same price, like they haven't been hitting us with the same cost increase. So I know a lot of the complaints about Etsy too is like the fees are going up and
Oh
like the
yeah.
value's going down. But
hmm
obviously you can do there's a lot of e-commerce packages on top of WordPress and yeah, Squarespace and Wix and all
Yep.
those
And there's
things, right?
all that I've looked at, and like I haven't
Just
settled
gotta
down to figure out which one yet.
yeah,
Yep.
just got to do it. Well, maybe this is one of those things where it's like maybe you're better off just like finding somebody that can just like port the listings over, copy paste, do a little copy pasta. Who knows? Like there's,
Yeah, I don't know.
I
I
know,
don't know.
I know,
I don't know the answer to that.
I know, I know. Well, listen, I know we're moving over our hour, and I appreciate your flexibility on our time. So let's like kind of start to wrap up here because I mean this is just one of those subjects where it's just like we could revisit this multiple times and
Oh yeah.
whatnot. But you've done a phenomenal job of like giving some great pro tips, talking about some things, talking about sourcing components, thinking outside of the box, spending a little time to research and educate yourself on naming conventions and stuff like that, so that you're not trying to just develop something that could be easily done. We didn't even get into your fabricating of stuff because I know you offer stuff where, correct me if I'm wrong, you're either CNC or laser cutting some of the components,
Oh yeah. Oh,
right?
okay. Well, real quick, this
Yeah.
is a good. I recently started using Send Cut Send,
Oh yeah.
which is
Okay.
amazing. They basically you upload a vector file. They will laser cut metal, plastic, whatever, and they will even do bending, tapping, and threading and stuff like that. And what impressed me about them was the pricing. So you can see it in the background over there. We did the Ghost Trap remote control Ghost Trap for tested,
Yeah.
and so it has aluminum plates on the front and side like this, metal
hmm
plates here.
Yeah.
So I got metal plates, so front, sides, top plate, bar graph plate, and bumpers
Yeah.
for 3 remote control traps made for around $100, and they turned it around in a week.
That's
Like
amazing
Wow.
for something custom like
I
that.
was blown away. Like
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
holy cow. So I started dipping for years. People have been asking me for real metal plates for the trap.
Sure.
What I've been doing is there's a really good stuff called Metal Graph, which is a faux, it's laser cuttable. It's got a silver plastic core and
Uh-huh.
then
Uh-huh.
like a very thin metal veneer on it.
Yeah.
They look
hmm
great
Yeah.
and they laser cut nice. So I've been doing those for years. Because I didn't have access to do them for real.
Yeah.
So I did a test run with Send Cut Send of real metal plates. They turned out great. The price point was that I could sell them for just a little bit more than the fake ones, and
Yeah.
so I'm like, done.
And now you don't have to
Or
cut them anymore.
Nice.
yeah,
Nice.
or
Yeah.
like dumb stuff, like other things to think about, like uh, the handles for the Ghost Trap are
Yep.
metal.
Yep. Yeah.
So I would sit and cut all of these by hand and drill holes in them by hand. And I was like, this sucks. And deburr them. So I found a local metal shop that will cut the tubing for me and deburr it. And it technically it's 3 times as much as what I was paying before, which is the raw materials. But
Right.
I'm like, wait, I'm saving hours of time.
Yep.
It's totally worth it.
Yeah.
So I started
hmm
doing that, or like I sell for the electronics kits. I sell 2-inch brass rods
Yeah.
that are the contacts.
Yeah.
I found a place online that will cut them once again 3 times as much as what I was paying, which was like 20 cents. But
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, totally worth it.
Yeah.
Find stuff like that, and it's getting easier to find with the internet and like shops popping up on internet.
Right.
Sometimes and don't I talk myself out of it a lot because like, oh, there's no way that's going to be cheaper. You'd be surprised.
I've been surprised multiple. We use EMT as the basis of some of our parts on our thing. So the conduit tubing, obviously familiar. And I've gone through the same exact part where we were like manually chopping them, and I'm like, this is not, or using a pipe cutter or whatever.
Yeah.
I can't quite afford a Swiss lathe to automate that whole process yet. But found a machinist that was doing it at a reasonable price. And when I started factoring in what the actual value of my time was, I was like, oh, yeah, this is actually a better choice, and it frees you up for other stuff. So so that's great tip, man. I'm glad. It sounds like we're kindred spirits in a lot of these journeys and stuff. And I thank you for sharing those with us.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thanks. It's fun. You don't get to talk about this kind of stuff too much, but
I know.
I think it's useful and helpful, even whether you're just a maker or trying to sell a little something on the side.
Well, listen, I was saying pre-show, or I was trying to talk Jen into this, but if we end up doing a panel on maker entrepreneurship, kind of starting a business stuff, I would love to have you with us for that, because I think there's a lot of interest in this kind of thing. And these little tips, I think, I mean, I wish somebody told me this stuff when I was getting started. And so hopefully maybe we can do something like that at Silicon or at another show coming up. I know there's another number of opportunities in the Bay Area and beyond. So who knows what the future brings. With that said, anything you want to tease, that you're working on, you're excited about, things coming up that you're showing off?
So in the shop, my shop is a little empty right now because I got cleaned out after Adam put his proton pack thing on there.
Yep.
So I'm working on restocking. I've been working on offering more stuff, but like I am working on one of the number one things I get asked for is ghost trap pedal kits. Because everybody buys a spirit trap and they don't have a pedal. So I am actually working towards offering full pedal kits, like all the parts, not just like the hardware. And I'm working on that. I'm getting very close to that. And down the line, I do plan on offering full ghost trap kits. I'm just working out the details on the best way to do that.
Okay.
So I just got my friend Mel working on upgraded electronics. We're gonna release some updated code here soon for free, and hopefully maybe some drop-in electronics like way down the road.
Oh man, that would be slick.
Awesome.
Is there a link? I think you've got some video from the tested video. Send me that link so we can put it in the description so people can see this thing like in all of its glory. And if you guys are interested in this, first of all, support your local maker. Go check out Sean's stuff. He's got more than just ghost traps as well, guys. He's a very talented designer, maker, and stuff. He dabbles in a lot of things. Go check him out. Man, this has been fantastic. We're gonna have to have you back some point, and we can, do a catch up.
Yeah, I like that. I do like helping people out and like learn from our mistakes and misery.
Absolutely.
Our shared misery, our shared, as Amy loves to say, like we all bond over our shared trauma. Stuff like that. It's very true, especially with makers.
Oh, here's one last thing that I wanted to mention. Before we go, is I know like
the floor is yours.
Like I said, I have the advantage of I'm on tested, and I know that is an advantage to me that I get mentioned, and sometimes they link to the shop, or I will present something that I later have on the shop, and that's a huge advantage over a lot of people. But one of my suggestions, if you're doing this kind of stuff, like how do you get noticed? Like there's so much stuff on Etsy.
Yes.
Like it can be like you look up and it's like you're just page after page of the same stuff.
Yep.
And one of my suggestions is search out the specialized user groups, forums, stuff like that would directly appeal to. And start posting stuff on there.
Yes.
Because that is a captive audience. Like that is like directly who wants your stuff.
No,
and
know your
that
Makes a
customer.
can
lot of
that can
sense.
go a
Yeah.
long way to getting you noticed, I think. So like the Facebook groups, the user forums, like I go on GB fans, that's like a built-in, like they want ghost traps, so like
Mm.
if you're making
Right.
something, like who specifically would want this, and search out those specific communities, and don't be obnoxious about it, but like get yourself out
Hmm.
there, and let them know that you have it, because they just may not know that it exists.
I'm really glad you said that because that seems like an obvious thing when you hear it said out loud, but you'd be surprised because in this day and age, like everybody's thinking like, oh, well, I got to put my stuff on YouTube and social media and stuff like that. And none of that is targeted in the way that it needs to be for business, right? So if
Yeah.
you're just
Hmm.
making content and trying to build, a personal brand, that's a completely different thing than what you're doing where sniping guys,
Yeah.
not just like shouting because otherwise, you're just shouting into the void
And
and everybody's trying to get
Yep.
noticed.
yeah, and even being like I'm known in the Ghostbusters community and stuff like that, and I'll put something as like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. People are gonna love this, and it's
Yeah.
like crickets. I'm like, huh, I really thought that this was
Yeah.
like, and then I'll hop over to the GB fans and just be like in
Yeah.
the for sale section, I'll be like, hey, I just threw these up in my shop. If anybody's looking, it's like, like it, like they just didn't know, like, and like I have like 4,000 Twitter followers. It isn't a ton, but it's not shabby. And
Sure.
I'll always post on that and everything. And
Yeah.
sometimes like just nothing, crickets.
Yeah.
And then, but I go to the specific like
Hmm.
targeted communities, and then
Right.
like, all right, and then they start chatting amongst themselves and letting their friends know, and then it's like I sell out.
Right.
So like think about it that way. Like is this something that you could find a target, like the right places to go to, and not just like putting your keywords and SEO and all that
Absolutely.
stuff.
Sure.
Like just go
Hmm.
the direct, like
Right.
right
Like
to the
go
source.
like this is sales and marketing in the modern age. Like go to where your
Yep.
people are. Don't wait. It's not if you build it, they will come. Like you can do
Yeah.
the best SEO and stuff, and then you're just waiting for people to find you. Like be proactive is
Yeah.
perfectly great
Hmm.
advice.
So that was just one
No,
tip
that's
that I found has
fantastic. Thank you
been
for
helpful.
thank you for sharing that. My friend, I wish you a great weekend. Thank you so much. I found this very inspiring. Best of luck with all of your stuff. If there's anything that we
Thank
can
you.
do to help shine a light, we love doing that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And stay in touch and let's
Yeah,
let's
do it
let's
again.
do it again soon. All
All
right.
right.
Everybody in the chat, thank you for joining us. We will catch you again next week for another awesome episode of Maker That Money. Next week, we have Jason Dory, founder of Lightburn, the
Nice.
awesome software for laser cutting and stuff like that. And he's going to give us his origin story and
That's
maker
awesome. I'll
history and
tune in
all
for
that
that.
stuff. And an overall cool guy to be with. So that we got that to
Hmm.
look forward to. We got some exciting get. We got Sophie Wong coming up the week after that. So that's a huge get as well. Lots of awesome stuff to talk about coming up. Next time, everybody bring a friend. Keep sending us the questions. Keep sending us your feedback. You can find us on Twitter. Our handles are all here. We got Sean's up there. We got Andrew's and mine. Everyone have a fantastic weekend, and we will catch you on the next Maker That Money. Till then, Pooch, Andrew, and Sean signing off. Bye-bye, everybody.
See ya.